the signatures off the front of the drive for in case you have problems of grub writing and other types of
The heck?
problems where things are A, which is all
This.
the drive.
Okay.
And then if that doesn't work, you reboot and you can force it with putting an F at the end of it. It's and what I was getting about to say before we went live with Majid is like if you're using something that uses RAID like MD is MD RAID, like if you're using something that uses RAID or ZFS. I don't know if ButterFS writes a signature. I'm not as familiar with that one, but they write signatures to the drive. For the example, I'm more familiar with ZFS and MD RAID. Is in order for them to keep track of the drives, it writes a signature to each drive, so that with the drive serial number, so that if you take a drive out and put it back in, it doesn't matter what order you put it in. It knows what order it should be in, just by this signature. But if you try to take an old RAID drive and you try to repurpose it as a regular operating system drive or a storage drive that's not RAID, you'll have problems formatting that drive or using it sometimes because of what happens is it writes that signature, and that signature is wider than the boot area. So sometimes it goes into an area that's normally not reserved for booting. So that's what I would suggest you try. And
So I was going to say, how do you specify the drive if you're doing it through a live install?
if you're going through a live ISO, just open up a terminal window.
Yeah.
And when you're in the terminal window, you want to type in sudo. And then, well, first of all, you want to know the drive that you're wanting to do this to. So you either can use lsblk space TACF, and that will give you the list of all of your drives and what's on them. I mean, as far as the operating system it goes, like ext4, if it's any EFI partition, which will show up as a FAT32, swap, any of those. Block ID is another one you can use, but it's I think LSBLK is much more verbose in what it says. But you want to know what drive you want to do this to. Like if it's your boot drive and it was /dev/SDA, then you would type in sudo space wipefs space, and you can do -A and then space /dev/SDA, and then press enter, and it should complete successfully. If not, you can force it by using the adding F to that command, so it would be AF. That's just what I think of off the top of my head.
Okay. When NVMe is what's coming up when I do the LSBLK.
Is that the only drive that you have in that computer?
No. So I've got the live thing running.
Okay.
It says SDA SJ1. That's the live user because it says my mount points. Right.
That's the thing. That's the confusing part about booting off of a USB live disk is they usually will identify themselves as like dev SDA as when what happens is it moves down. Like if you actually had an SSD in there, it makes your dev SDA that you were using dev SDB. But if the drive that you were trying to boot off of was your NVMe drive, then you'll have to do. And I'd have to look this up because that always trips me up with the naming convention for NVMe. It's something like /dev/NVMe.
0N1. That's the one I've got.
Then it's like 0N, because it's basically 0 drive number, partition number. So if it was drive number 1, partition number 1, it would be NVMe underscore 0. Is it N1? I think it's N01.
0N1, and then it's got 0N1P1, which is a FAT32 one, and then there's got NVMe 0N1P2 ButterFS, which I think is my because I'm pretty sure it was ButterFS, the Fedora install on this. So if I just put NVMe 0N1, it should wipe both of those, isn't it?
Now, is there anything on there that you're wanting to save, or you just wanting to wipe everything and install?
Just wiping. I'm just going to wipe everything and install.
So there's no data retention at all.
No.
Yeah. So if there's no data retention at all, then you don't really have to be very granular. You should just be able to do the one NVMe drive that you were wanting to boot off of, so that you wouldn't even have to. You shouldn't have to mention the partition.
Yeah. Cool. I'm not trying that.
Let me look at that command syntax again. But yeah, if anyone has an Android phone, there is a utility. It's basically not really it. You can search for Linux commands, and let me get the full name of it here. If anyone wants to install it, it's called Linux. Linux Command Library.
Is that on F-Droid or Play Store or?
It could be on the F-Droid. I did it for the Play Store, but the Linux Command Library, and then you just open it up, and it has categories, and then you can also search.
Oh yeah, I found it. Simon
and
Schubert.
And I just searched, and I just typed in FS. Wipe FS. And it says erase file system RAID and partition table signatures. Then you tap on it, and it will give you the TLDR, and it gives you the synopsis, parameters, description, caveats, exit status, history, see also, and author. And like the caveats, like using WipeFS on a mounted device can lead to data loss if not used carefully and with the -F flag. Ensure you understand the consequences before forcing operations, because -F pretty much brute forces the action. It's pretty much sort of like the no preserve route when you're doing the RM-RF. It's saying, yes, I want to do this. But the description, and this for the benefit of everyone listening here, WipeFS examines a specified device to identify file system, RAID, and partition table signatures or metadata. It can then selectively erase these signatures to make the device appear blank. This is useful for preparing a device for reformatting or partitioning. WipeFS is a safer alternative to using DD because it only targets specific signatures rather than blindly overwriting the entire device. It avoids accidentally corrupting data outside of the signature area. It is designed to work on block devices, but can be used on other files containing metadata. And a block device is basically your SSD, your bootable device. So what is if you make like a sparse file, you can work on a sparse file. But if you don't know what a sparse file is, then don't worry about it.
And then one last thing before I've completely taken over this thing. If you're doing manual partitioning, and you're doing mount points and having an EFI partition, do you just mount it as /boot or do you slash it as /boot EFI?
You can do this. This is sort of like you ask nerds. Ask two nerds that question. You're going to get 10 answers.
Okay.
For that, generally, and I think this is like distro specific, but you can do like for your EFI, you can do /boot/EFI, and that should be fine because I believe that's what Debian does. But some of them you can get more granular and mount them separately. But I just think it'd be just as well just to do /boot/EFI because there's going to be a folder tree underneath that because like on Arch, they have like capital EFI, and then they'll have another folder that's lowercase EFI, which really gets confusing.
Right, let's see if this works. Either that or I'm going to completely balk this machine. What could possibly go wrong, yeah? What could possibly go wrong? This is what happens.
The famous last words.
Sorry?
Famous last words.
Yeah, exactly. Famous last words, I know. Hey, why not, eh?
I'm testing the Debian 13 on my spare machine.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hard freeze and it's hyper stable.
Yeah, I've learned over the years with Debian testing that and thus they're going through a big migration, like when they were moving over to like a couple different times. I think when it was like Wheezy into Jesse, I think it was, they were doing System D. And then I think it was, Debian 9, which I'm blanking on the code name for that one. That one was when they started doing the UEFI stubs, because before that you had to use MBR boot to boot Debian. But other than those, other than that, you're pretty safe with testing as long as you stick to sudo apt update instead of sudo apt dist or sudo apt dist -upgrade, because what upgrade does is it does a dependency check, so it will not install a package that has incompatible dependencies. But if you do sudo apt dist -upgrade, it will replace new packages and remove other packages to satisfy dependencies. And that's when you can break stuff.
And things go 80 breakthrough.
Yeah. It's sort of like with SID. SID, one quick way to break SID is to do dis upgrade because they're pulling off of experimental. And that's where they're just throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks. And they don't even bother scraping the spaghetti off the wall. They just they just move on to something else.
Let's
So
go
you do
ahead and do it.
Okay, here's a question for you, Dale. Have you run Ubuntu Unity any time recently?
No, I think the last time I tried Unity was when Sudra released it. I checked it out however many years that was ago, but I haven't seen it since. I ran it for a few years, I think, when Canonical went back, just before Canonical went back to GNOME. What was that? Was that Ubuntu 12 maybe? I think, what was it, 14?
They went back to GNOME in it's between 16 and 18.
Okay.
I remember having the conversation with when Popey was on, and I thought it was 18, and he said no, it was 16, and I don't know if it actually was maybe one of the ones in between, because I don't think they did it first for an LTS straight away.
Yeah, because I was using Ubuntu from 10 until 12, and it was Unity. So I'm thinking it had to have happened some point after that, 14 or 16. But yeah, I remember it quite a bit, and it was pretty similar to how I remembered it with Rudra's reboot of it. What did you seen it recently?
No, I'm just so I like stuff that's a bit flashy, right? Hence, I've always kind of run GNOME or something like that. The device that I'm trying to put a distro on at the minute is a couple of years old. I want to say 6th gen i5, but it might be 8th gen i5. Might be 8th gen actually. So I've been running GNOME on it with Fedora, and it's fine, but you can tell that it's a little bit creaking a little bit. So I thought, do I go for one of the kind of real lightweight environments like the XFCEs and the LXDEs and LXQts and stuff like that. And I thought, well, I mean, it's got enough horsepower to do a little bit more. So that's why I was thinking. Now, the last time I did run Unity, I remember running it. It was on this same box actually, and it lasted all of about 48 hours, mainly because not so clever man here decided that the best time to do a big distro hop was the day before I conducted online medical interviews, on said machine, because obviously that's a sensible idea, isn't it?
Yes.
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
exactly, and so that's what I did. And unsurprisingly, when the next day when I tried to log on to whatever video conferencing thing it was to try and do said interviews, the system just shat the bed. And then so I had to do a very, very quick reinstall nuke and pave, and I just got, I think, whatever, probably 2204 or something like that, of the standard edition, and just put that on because I just needed something to work like quickly. So that was the last time I used Unity. And so I was just tempted to try it again as something which is a little bit more flashier than, say, Mate or LXD or Q, as I said, the Qt based ones. But not as maybe as heavy as GNOME. Everybody says that Plasma is lighter than it used to be, and it does seem to be lighter than it used to be. But at the same time, I'm not. Yeah, I'm still not sure whether it's necessarily light enough for this. If that makes sense. Any of that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that they did to make it lighter, I think it was during 5.18, because prior to that, I think they had a lot of shell scripts and some Python that was doing a lot of the background processing and stuff during boot and during the desktop's operation, normal use. And they, if I remember correctly, it was 5.18 when they scrapped all that and they made proper binaries to do the same thing, and it really sped up the boot time, and it also used a lot less memory, so there wasn't an interpreter needed to interpret the Python, because that's one of the downsides of those types of things like Bash and Python is they have to be interpreted, and that takes an extra process of read and then interpret and then go back and read, interpret, where a binary just is off to the races. But I'm not a developer. Some of this stuff I just learned through others and just my own experience. But yeah, last time I did a review on plasma, I'm thinking it did reduce quite a bit. I'm just doing this off my memory. I'd have to look at the old distro hopper notes, be sure. But I'm thinking plasma was getting upwards of the 640, 650, like closer to 800 megabytes.
Mhm.
But I think six comes in at about 600, if I remember correctly, on a level boot round. I think if I remember correctly, it was 6.25. So it's not as light as something like Bodhi or Mate. I mean,
Mhm.
even XFCE, depending on how many widgets they have loaded on XFCE, XFCE can be well under 600.
Okay. Well, now that Joe's back, he can tell us all his adventures as well.
Oh, I was letting you guys talk while I worked on something. I
Well, we
was
can
adding,
also,
well, I wasn't adding to my show notes, but I was
Yeah.
adding to my bi-weeklies by doing more crap.
Oh yeah, and just
I thought we could.
before I hand it all over to Joe, one last thing, right? So remember, I've complained a lot about my NAS. Yeah, it's just getting worse. Now the hard drives have got corrupted, and I've had to contact Seagate and send it back, having done half of the, checking stuff myself. I've lost up 4 terabytes worth of data. And as I said, I'm really regretting having bought this. I should have just got a bloody normal home server or something. But with that done, I think I'll hand it over to Joe, because Joe's got some interesting stuff to talk about.
I got a lot of
He
stuff to
says.
talk about. I don't know if it's interesting or not.
Yeah, well, we got astonishingly low standards here, don't we? So I mean, go on.
Yeah, but it has been, like several weeks since I did any bi-weeklies, and the show changing, I don't really know how it's going to go in the future. But we shall see. I reprinted my mini rack so that it's now made out of PETG instead of PLA. There are several parts that could still stand to be reprinted, but I don't know how much I want to get into that. I started with the frame, which was like 8 pieces of 4U in order to get an 8U frame. Along with a set of handles and feet, the frame pieces are also double width in order to allow building out to the sides. So if you want to, have side by side, you can. I did populate all the rail holes with nuts, with something like 280 nuts. Most were press fit into place, which worked out just fine, although some did need to be glued to stay correctly. And I did that so that I wouldn't need to worry about it later, trying to hold things into position while I was screwing it all together. I think it came out really well. The clearance provided by the feet was actually really welcome and did a lot to make cable management easier and lower temperatures on my main computer. Also, the 4U rails turned out to be 4.5U, and I was able to put that to good use as well. On the bottom, I was able to add a 120 millimeter fan to help with cooling. Next above that is the 3U tray that holds those 7 hard drives. I also added some extenders, some cable extenders, to make it so the drives could more easily be moved and replaced, or pulled out and put back in. I also designed and 3D printed a shelf specifically for the small form factor power supply that I was using to replace the old loud power supply on the previous setup. With slots to hold the new power supply and the ATX power supply adapter that would add a rocker switch to the whole thing so I can power it on and off using that. The print came out pretty well, although I think that if I were to do it again, I would redo the rocker switch holder, either on the front or on the side, in order to cut down the amount of support material that's used and to add to the stability of the mount itself. Now, this was installed directly above the hard drives, along with 2 80 millimeter fans that allow more airflow in the correct direction. I also added a front panel cover that blocks a lot of view to the cables on the inside. Because it is just a standard ATX power supply, there's a lot more cables in there that I'm not using. Also makes using the patch panel above it a bit more difficult, but it does keep things very neat. The patch panel covers the front, and the power supply takes up the slot in the rear. Now, that patch panel has, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 HDMI and 5 Ethernet. And then above the patch panel and power supply is my GS108 router, and some short cables to connect it to the patch panel. Above that is the HP ProDesk Mini with the M.2 SATA adapter that is allowing me to hook up a couple of the drives from the couple of slots below. Above that, I had to start getting creative. I needed to design some cross pieces that go under the handles in order to be able to add a shelf across the top. That was just a matter of changing the size of the 4U to fit front to back and still allow the end mounts to connect to the other side rails. Using that, I was able to redesign the old 2U panel that I had previously created, that's split in the middle and has a series of bolts that act as connectors. I made it twice as thick and extended it to cover the whole top. This design was already made to be split up, like I said, into 2 parts and attached with 1/4-inch bolts. This is to provide stability while also making it so that it can still be printed on the Ender 3, and the 1/4-inch bolts allow me to add a screen to the top. That I wanted to make a mount across the front, but I wasn't able to yet. I am going to use that to hook up some pies and that top shelf. There is a shelf area directly above the Pro Desk that I'm going to use for that. That's going to take some designing and some work to probably put a couple of 2.5-inch drives there and some Raspberry Pis. And yeah, the screen will be directly above that. The fans on this device and the new power supply are just so much quieter than the old one. And the overall build is much more stable than the old. I was very surprised when I started taking apart the old one and how it just seemed, the PLA just seemed to be crumbling. I am glad that I did the rebuild with PETG and with generally thicker, sturdier parts. I did have a lot of trouble printing with it, and several prints failed. A lot of hardware issues with the printer that in this case are probably better not to itemize, considering, you know, how long a time frame it was and how much I went through. It's going to take me a while to fix some of them even at this point, but yeah, PETG, not the easiest material to print with. Like when you're comparing it to PLA, I suppose it's easier than ABS since you don't need an enclosure. I'm going to have to do a lot more tests to make sure that the settings are correct for it. I've tried out various temperatures on benchies, and I think I have it a little bit more dialed in now. Moving on from the hardware portion of this, I also want to mention that some of the software mistakes that I have made in regard to this device. The biggest being that I installed Watchtower on all of my instances of Docker in order to keep everything updated. I mean, it sounds like a good idea, but all it has done is cause me trouble. A lot of that is my own fault since I did not put in any exclusions, but it is what caused all of my issues with losing Nextcloud configuration, and it also caused several of my prints to fail when my Octoprint would update mid-print. So I've disabled a lot of the Watchtower for now, and I'll come back to it at a later date. In regards to my printer, I think I need to give it a more thorough overhaul and run a whole bunch of calibrations to get everything dialed in. I also either need to replace the screen or put some work into cleaning up the connections on the rotary switch in it so that that works correctly. Very difficult to hit specific numbers with the way that it is now. I mean, I can do most things by sending G code, but that is not always helpful, like when setting E-steps. But that should be an easy fix with some IPA or some deoxit. Also easy enough to replace the whole thing if required. I'm also looking into making some more videos on my own for YouTube, or maybe some audio or HPR. I don't think that I'm at the point where I want to turn it into a business or anything, but I would like to branch out a bit more. I feel like I've been resting on my laurels now for a while. Also, something very interesting, I got a new camera. Of course, that's not the interesting part. The camera was a return from Micro Center, and when I hooked it up, I noticed that the colors were slightly oversaturated towards red. So I found the commands for V4L2 that would correct it in software, and then I added those commands to UDEV, and it's all corrected, and I'm using it right now. And after the system restarted, every time this connects or disconnects, it changes the colors so that they're not so red. Moving on from that, I'm supposed to...
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
You know, you're saying about your YouTube videos. What are you planning to have on that? What kind of things?
I haven't decided yet. It might be a lot of the stuff that I do on the bi-weeklies, so I'm not cluttering you guys up. I don't know if I want to do, weightlifting and fitness. I mean, there's so many people already doing that. And honestly, when it comes to weightlifting, it's not like I'm doing something new every week. I'm doing the same crap over and over again. I mean, consistency is what gets you to your goals. So
just because I mean, one of the things I wouldn't say I've found, but one of the things I've kind of come to understand is if you're doing any kind of podcast or video, YouTube channels, whatever, you need to be quite focused.
Right.
It seems. I mean, I don't mean focused in the sense of the amount of effort you're putting in. I mean, obviously there's that's just life, isn't it? The more effort you put in, the better results you get, and that's just the way things go. I mean, what it is that you're trying to achieve.
Right.
If it's going to be fitness, then
well, that's one of the reasons I haven't started doing anything.
Yeah, because it's like if it's going to be fitness, then all you're going to do is fitness, because that's the way you're going to get people to actually look for it. And
right, that's how you get a consistent audience. That's how you grow an audience.
Yeah. I mean, if it's going to be tech, that's fine. It can be tech. Do you know what I mean? But then you can't really do the fitness stuff, because then that's generally
it depends on how many channels I want to run.
True, that's true.
And how little sleep I want to get from editing videos. So
yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No worries.
You in full flow.
So the whole point of the roundtable is, if you want to get in, ask questions, because I do have like the commands and stuff that I used, like written down and shareable. And if it was the regular show, I might do that, because then there's standardized show notes. But since we're not there on this show yet, I haven't gone into the specific commands. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I was supposed to go on vacation to Florida to visit some family, but that fell through because my van broke down and cost about $2,500 to fix. And then my Buick needed to be fixed, which cost another $2,300. And this is after my freezer died, the freezer portion of my refrigerator died, and I had to replace that to a tune of, $1,500. But then the day I got my Buick home, my garage door came off the rails, and the next day that cost me $800 to get fixed. So yeah, I could go through the whole saga of one thing after another. I mean, the van had to go back to the shop 3 times in order to finally get fixed. But I don't think anybody really cares. But I did have to sell a bunch of my work stock in order to, actually be able to pay for this stuff so I can continue going to work. And it might slow down some of my projects in the future, because I'll still be paying for some of it. But I will say that my garage door required me to move a lot of the things off the shelves that I have in there, and it's given me an excuse to reorganize a bunch of it, throw a bunch of stuff away, and make a lot more room. I'm hoping that my tools will be a little bit better organized and maybe not all over the place, and I'll actually be able to find things when I need them. And then, like,
when you sell stuff, right? Like tech stuff or whatever it might be. Yeah. How easy is it, do you find, to do that? I found it really relatively difficult.
It
I mean,
depends.
I mean, you know, the computer stuff just depreciates so much. It's
It
like
does.
it is like so a mate of mine, the convert, you know, the one who I said I was trying to get into Linux.
Right.
He's got into open source, but he hasn't yet done that final step into Linux yet. But anyway, he was sent me something about a new laptop that's come out, and we were like, I was looking at it. Oh yeah, it's very nice, this, that, and the other. And I said, yeah, but I mean, is it that much better than the last generation one? And then he
Right.
said, oh, and then he said, no. Before that, I said, oh, probably expensive. He goes, no, it's a decent price. Look on the website. So it was a Lenovo one. Went on the Lenovo website. And it turns out, at least in the UK, they've got a summer sale going on. And I looked and I thought, last year's stuff is about a third off, at least. Yeah, between a quarter and a third. And I just sat there thinking, bloody hell, man. This stuff depreciates like anything. You just, you know, it's almost like you're throwing money away if you're buying laptops anyway. That are not
If you're
Apple.
buying new, you
Apple's,
might as well be throwing away your money. I mean, seriously.
yeah, I mean, I know. I mean, I just felt really. I was like, oh God, what a waste of you know, how much, you know, and so that's the thing I've been finding. It's like, so I mean, I've got a couple of laptops and things like that that I don't need, and I could quite happily sell. But you know, at best, I'll get 50% of what I paid for them.
Well, see,
Do you know what I mean?
I'll normally buy things broken or used and then turn around and sell them after I've fixed them. So I will usually at least make my money back, if not make a profit, if I'm selling electronics.
I mean, the one thing that makes it a little bit easier in the UK, I don't know if it's the same in the States, is that eBay have dropped their basically you can sell for free on eBay now. You couldn't sell for free before. I'm talking, so this is a change that happened at the beginning of the year. I don't know if it's some regulatory reason they've done it, but you know, the normal kind of 11-12% cut that they take of whatever you sell. Now, I think what they're doing is they're adding buyer protection onto the thing, and so that it's the seller, the buyer is now paying that 10% that they're then taking.
I don't know if they're
which has meant,
but I don't,
yeah,
I don't sell on eBay either. I sell on like Facebook Marketplace.
Yeah,
I
so
sell electronics.
So I used to sell on eBay, but then that was an issue because, as I said, the whole 10-12%, whatever it was. Then I started Facebook Marketplace, and Facebook Marketplace very quickly just turned into a world of scammers. You know, yes, I will come and buy it, but you need to first transfer 50 quid so that I can send a courier. And you're like, yeah, right, okay.
No. Either you show up at this time at this location, or you get nothing.
Yeah.
With money.
Yeah.
Oh, I sent you too much money. Oh, I feel terrible for you.
Yeah.
I'm not sending it back. I'm gonna wait for it to clear my account before I do anything with it.
So, anywho, I mean, I do look for kind of deals that are there and see if I can make a profit. And so, for example, I found a Honor Magic V3, so the foldable phone came out end of last year. Originally, it was being sold brand new for like 1,600. Managed to find one for 650. Which I thought that's a good thing. So I'm going to see if I can try and make a little bit of money on that. It's not broken or anything.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of TLC, really.
Yeah. Well, I don't really do it to try and profit on it anyway. I mean, for a while there, I was supporting my buy it, fix it, sell it habit by buying, fixing, and selling. But then, yeah, I mean, everybody started doing it, and I wasn't really making money at it anymore for the next project. So, meh.
Yeah.
But I did order a couple of headsets to work on because I haven't worked on some headsets in a while. Right now, I'm like literally right in front of me. I'm working on a Arctis SteelSeries Arctis 9 or Arctis. Yeah, I think it's either the 9 or the 9X. I'm not sure, but has it's a little broken on the plastic. I don't know how well y'all are going to be able to see because I can't even see y'all's picture right now. I don't know if y'all quit using your cameras or what. But
No.
yeah, you're not going to really be able to see. But because I've already fixed it mostly, I have to add another spacer to hold it in correctly. But the plastic was cracked around the hinge to the point where it was like all this plastic here in the front was gone. Right there. So I've 3D printed one piece. I thought it was going to be a decent fix, but turned out I didn't make it thick enough, but it's already glued into place. So I'm making a spacer now to make it so that the it doesn't go like this anymore, or at least not as much, because it should not be moving that much. I'm gonna make a spacer, glue it to the sidewall, and it looks like I might have to put some reinforcement in the back right here where there's a crack all the way through the plastic. I already had to do that next to the wheel as well. So it's been interesting. I've been using heat shrink tubing as support material at the back of the plastic just to help hold the glue into place and to add a little bit of structural support. So we'll see how well that works. I haven't tried that before. But I like my other pair of Arctis 9s that I got from a pawn shop at a pretty decent price. So I'm hoping that these turn out nearly as well. And I'm just making a spacer to go around the hinge on the inside, and I'll glue it into place, and if I do it right, it won't stop the forward and back movement, but it will stop the in and out movement, which should help limit that right there. That right there is the big problem. Or if I have to, I'll make another spacer to go on the outside to help hold it all into position. I mean, I just want it to work. I'm not overly sensitive about how the plastic looks in the end, because this is not getting sold. But I think if I get the spacer in there and I get it glued to the sidewall in the proper position, putting a proper amount of pressure on the hinge, it'll work really well. You should be able to see the hinge and everything on the inside right there. Computer, turn on green. See it? That little piece of metal right below my thumb. Oh well. But yeah, that's what I'm working on today. I had to order a freaking Torx 6 screwdriver because Arctis wants to use crazy locking freaking screws. Oh. So what else you guys been working on, Charles?
I've been working on living the dream.
Mm-hmm.
Or something
Well,
like that.
your audio is a lot better now, I must say.
Yep. Yeah. Dale and I kind of took a look at that a couple days ago. Seems to be working a lot better now. So I haven't been working on anything. The only thing I was looking at a security flaw that was found with the core dump. Did you guys hear about that?
No? Well, actually, now that I think about it, maybe I did.
Yeah, it was the end of May, the 1st of June. There's two CVEs, 2025-5054. It affects Ubuntu's app port, and then CVE 2025-4598 affects Red Hat's and Fedora's systemd core dump. And basically, it's a way that core dumps, and attackers can extract sensitive information from the core dumps, and there's
Okay.
fixes and patches out for it. So,
So,
yeah.
so is that
I'm sorry, say it again.
the security aspect in your work?
Oh, no, I don't. I'm a wannabe security guy. I mean, I've taken some coursework, CompTIA Security Plus. I've taken like the coursework for version 501, 601, and now they're up to 701. I haven't taken the certification test yet.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
but yeah, it is something that I watch and listen to and kind of try to stay up on. So, but as you know, it's an arms race, and every day there's something new.
Oh yeah. And especially when you got noobs like me, do you know what I mean, doing stupid things, you know.
You know, you guys were talking about plasma earlier, and I haven't
Yeah.
ran plasma on anything because I don't have any modern hardware per se, and I don't have anything that's got a dedicated. Well, I take that back. I do have a dedicated graphics card in that OS that you guys make fun of me about. I was using a couple of weeks ago. Generally, with internal graphics or built-in graphics, what has been the experience, or it just kind of depends? Running Wayland,
I mean,
because I've yet to run it before.
I found internal graphics is fine for whatever the stuff I do, but then I'm not a big gamer or video editor or anything like that. I know that Linux support has got a lot better for, you know, discrete GPUs, and you know, you can get there's lots of different drivers that you can get depending on what kind of cards and things like that. But as I said, it's not something I've ever done or needed. Therefore, I think your mileage will vary, as people will say, and sometimes you just have to suck it and see and try it out and see what happens. I think if gaming is a thing, I know Pop OS is good with external GPUs and stuff. I know Eric likes it a lot. Yeah, I mean that's about as much as I can say, really. What about you, Joe? What do you reckon?
What's the question?
About graphics cards and Linux?
Well, you're right. The internal graphics are usually good enough. But I do some transcoding. And while I haven't noticed any issues with like my ProDesk transcoding using Jellyfin, I have found it to be better on Plex, especially with the multitude of systems that I send things to be able to process that with a GPU, a dedicated GPU.
Okay.
And
just quick, I haven't seen. There's no Wayland version desktop for Mint, is there?
I think there was at one point. I don't know. That you can force it into Wayland right now, but it's still very beta.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah,
I thought that.
It's very experimental.
There's an experimental session in Cinnamon at the moment, and the plan was, if I remember this from a Mint Monthly News from about 6 months ago, Clem was talking about having the transition done by 2026.
Oh, that's right. I do. Remember this now.
With the next LTS that will come out when 2604 comes out, and then they rebase Mint, it'd be Mint 23, I suppose, on that they would hope to have a fully functioning Wayland session. I remember that I said from some Mint Monthly News maybe about 6 months ago or so. I have seen videos of people using Cinnamon and Wayland, and it very much is still experimental. I think one of the videos I saw was my Linux experiment, Nick, on that, saying that it was surprisingly usable for something that's basically an alpha, but it is basically an alpha. So yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, now that you mentioned that, I do recall on one of your podcasts a while back talking about that, but it was just, you were talking about whales, so it made me think about that.
Yay, we really do have listeners. Somebody listens. It's not just us talking into the ether.
Exactly. So I have a question. Speaking of versions and things, I know this was talked about a long time ago, but I don't remember. The kernel version of Linux Mint, I think, is at 6.8, as I recall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what Linux Mint has always kind of done is they used to just stay with the LTS, version that was in the LTS. So for example, when the LTS base was 2204, it was on like 5.5 or something. So which was, as you can tell, is quite an old kernel. So what Mint did, when they got to the last point release before the next LTS version, so like in this case 21.3 before 22, they would release like an Edge ISO, which would have kernel updates and things like that. So I remember getting that and downloading that because I wanted the 6.7 kernel. I remember Bill did the same thing. He wanted the 6.8 kernel for some reason. I can't remember why. Apparently now they're going to ship kernel updates along with the point releases. So when you get like 22.1, 22.2, there will be like kernel ones as well, and then you're not going to just sit there for 2 years on an old kernel. Apparently, I've not checked that bit out myself yet, partly because I just haven't got around to it. That sounds about right, doesn't it, Dale? What I've just said.
Yeah, because that's why I was going to break in and mention this. I think it was sometime this spring, or it was sometime last fall. The canonical developers responsible for like kernel maintenance, that for all the Ubuntu, Ubuntu proper, and the other spins. That was one of the problems that they were looking at, because unless you get the .10, you're going to get the newest kernel at the time. And then what happens with that is that becomes either mainline or it becomes LTS, and then they can use it. But what happens is if they get out of sync with the kernel releases, then they may be testing this kernel for like 3 months, 4 months, and then they put it into an LTS, and then a year later, the kernel maintainers, retire that from LTS, and now you have an old kernel for another year. So what the kernel maintainers decided is they're going to be more proactive and more I don't know what else the word I was going to say, but anyways, they're going to be more proactive in the kernel maintenance. So if I'm just going to make up numbers because I'm not sure what the current versions of kernels are right now. I haven't really kept up with that. But let's just say you're going to release .10, and you look at the kernel and go, okay, 6.5. That's the current. Can't get any more recent than that. Or run with that, and then whatever the current LTS is at the time that they're going to release the next Ubuntu is the kernel that they will go with. They're not going to use the one that they were previously using in the testing. So it could be very well possible that if they get to the point where, like I said, I haven't kept track of the kernel release version, but let's just say they had 6.5, and then all of a sudden they're going to release it, and you release Ubuntu in a couple months, and all of a sudden 6.6 comes out. If they said if there's nothing in there that's really breaking, it's more of just adding drivers, fixing some fixes, nothing nothing announcing a new file system or announcing something, new in the kernel. They're going to go to that kernel. So it's going to benefit people like MX Linux. MX is still based on Debian. That's trying to think who else was. Zorin. That's the one I was thinking of, not MX. Zorin and Mint is going to benefit from this because they track what the canonical releases. So yeah, that's the last plan I heard. I'm not sure if that has changed, but that's the last plan I heard, from this fall or sometime this spring. But on to what Charles was saying about the.
Okay, so it's based on the Ubuntu LTS kernel, Mint.
Yeah, Mint will use whatever the current LTS is, and if Canonical keeps up with what their intentions are to roll the kernel versions faster, it could be possible, because what will happen, like in my example there, they could have like 2510, and you have 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you have 7 months. What's this say? Previously, let's just say a month before or 2 months before let's just say in March, the kernel devs promote a kernel into from mainline to LTS. Well, previously Canonical wanted to do testing. That was the whole idea of the 7 months of running that kernel. What they're doing now is, like I said, if there's nothing in the kernel that's really going to be major, like breaking, like introducing a new file system or experimental drivers for something, something that isn't quite fully kitted out yet, they will use it. So it could be possible that 2510, for example, could be using, I'll just make up the number 6.5. And it wasn't until like 2 months before they're going to release LTS for 2604, they will use that kernel. That's pretty much what Debian does already. So it's nothing like anything new. It was just more of Canonical being more of the belts and suspenders type with the kernels, and not wanting to break things. But what happens is it ends up, backfiring on them. We release an LTS that now, what is it up to now? 10 years? I think they're doing like 5 years, and I think you can get another 5, if you the Ubuntu Pro, that's the word I was thinking, the Ubuntu Pro, so you can have 10 years. So that kernel that was already 6 months old is already going to be even much older, 10 years later, 5 years later. So yeah. And to touch on your previous thing about the integrate graphics, like what the other guys were saying, in my experience,
just quickly to interrupt, I've got to get going, lads. Nice speaking to you all. Nice seeing you. I quite like this new format for the roundtable. It's good fun. I'll catch you guys next week, yeah?
Yeah, no, I'm the only one that did the bi-weekly stuff.
I did some stuff. I said about my NAS and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, catch you guys later. Take care.
Yep.
Bye. See ya.
My thing is just real quick. In my experience, Intel, I'd say anything past 4th gen, preferably like 6th gen Intel graphics. If you're doing a lot of encoding, like Joe was talking about, media encoding, 8th gen is much better for integrated graphics, because that's when they start getting into AV1, I think. I think it was AVN decode. I don't think it would do encode, but it added more features. If you want to do like AV1 and any of the like VP9 and stuff like that, you'll need a more recent integrated graphics version, like what would be like in the 11th gen a lot of my experience has been with AMD, and I will say, in comparison to Wayland, I think the Wayland FOSS drivers are much more seamless, more fluid on Wayland compared to, depending on the version of the Intel graphics you're using. You can see a little bit of a difference, maybe in some speed and some rendering. The one that's the big thing is with the new drivers for NVIDIA. You can tell a difference between the new Nouveau drivers and like an AMD integrated graphics, because it seems more smoother in comparison. But we call it the binary drivers for NVIDIA are much improved now, with NVIDIA being more attentive to things like that. But I think you can change the clock frequencies with the new Nouveau driver, so you're not stuck at the base frequency, because that was a problem before. You have anything else to say, William?
Okay, thanks.
Do you have anything else you wanted to talk about? Okay. Do anyone else have anything else to say before I give mine? Again,
Go for it. It's
Respond.
all yours.
Me? Okay.
Yep,
What is yours?
Excuse me? Okay. Guess I have a little bit of a delay on my end here. Pretty much I've just been installing Ethernet into my living room and my bedroom. I've only been here 3 years, and I finally got around to doing it. I got two these PoE powered what do they call it?
Switches.
Unify switches. Like, I can unplug my phone here because it was charging. I can show you. If I turn the camera around, let's see here. There's the one sitting on my desk in my office here. It's a 5-port gigabit switch, and the first port is the PoE input, and it's powered by PoE. And I did that so I wouldn't have other wall warts having to plug them in just for these, because it's they include them, but it's just a USB-C wall wart. And I've been doing that, and I'm making patch wires, custom length patch wires to match my other ones. Part of my OCD, which I don't have much OCD tendencies anymore, but that's the one of the ones I still do. Also, because it does look nice, I can show you what I have so far on my phone here if I switch the camera around again. I have it pulled away from the wall here so I can get behind it easier. But there's my switch. That's for my server segment. And then that's my router, my unified gateway. And then there's the patch bay. And then this one is going to be for my clients. That's going to be for my AP, my living room, my office, my bedroom. I haven't patched in the my living room yet because I'm still working on those cables now. But those are all my custom length Ethernet cables that I've done, and there's my server farm. Yeah, that's going to be my future Docker host. That's my first, what do they call that? Pi-hole. Second Pi-hole. And this one, the first Pi-hole, also does my Unify controller. There's going to be my media server. It's going to be Plex, and I'm going to probably experiment with Jellyfin. There's my cable modem. And then that is my, where's the door? Door's on this side. That's my my storage server. And I've got four drives in there. 4 terabytes, but they're in 2 mirrors. And the other thing that I was really excited about was this, oh, good heaven, 12 years old? I think this is a 12-year-old Netgear ReadyNAS Pro 4. It has 4 3.5-inch drive bays. And let me put the phone down here. I had bought that in like 2012, 2013. And I used it up until about 2018 when I got interested in the ZFS. I had used ZFS, this messing around with it since like 2010, but I never really used it in production for anything. And I had like a test server and stuff I was using, and I grown to trust it. So about 2016, 2018, I think somewhere around there is when I went over to a ZFS, and I wasn't really using this ReadyNAS. And it uses MD RAID for the RAID, and then it has ButterFS, BTRFS on top that does the actual file system, and it has a lot of the other features of not all the features of ButterFS because of the MD RAID, but it'll do checksums, it'll do the bitrot, and the other features. Any low level features is handled by, like the block level stuff is handled by the MD RAID. So, and they work kind of hand in hand, where they'll compare block sums and block integrity, and if they match, then there's not a problem. That's according to the ReadyNAS documentation of what I've read in the forums, because there was a forum post where one of the developers was explaining how it worked, and it's a similar thing to what Synology is doing on theirs with MD RAID and ButterFS on top. But it had been sitting unused, and the long story short, my friend was wanting one. And he was looking at the prices of it, and he's one of those things where he wasn't sure if he was going to use it. He didn't want to spend, the $600, $400 to $600 plus, another $300 or $400 on hard drives. So I let him use the ReadyNAS since I wasn't using it. And he had used it up until a couple months ago when Windows 10 was the last one to support CIFS version 1, or the SMB version 1, which has exploits if you have it. I can't remember what the problems were with the SMB version. Maybe somebody else may have details on that, but the problem was Microsoft started turning it off. And every time my friend would boot up the computer, he couldn't see the NAS, and he'd have to go in and turn on the SMB version 1. And after a while, that got annoying. And it got to the point where even if he left his computer on, updates would come through and it would reset it. And then he upgraded one of his computers to Windows 11, and it flat out does not use anything lower than version 2. So he gave it back to me because the only thing that could see it was his Linux Mint that he would do a boot into. and his other Windows 10 machines that he hasn't updated yet. So he actually got he did his research and found Ugreen, and we went up to a Micro Center a couple months ago and bought the Ugreen, and I think he got some drives, a couple drives for it. It'll hold up to 4 on this model. So he gave me back the Ready NAS. So the end of this story, I was thinking, well, it still works. I mean, it's perfectly fine, but it's just a bummer that it's stuck on this old version. So I started poking around, and I found out that some enthusiasts made an updated firmware based on the last version, because Netgear stopped supporting these in like 2018, I think 2020, somewhere around there. And they had the OS 6 was the last version for the Ready NAS. And it's got an Intel Atom. It's nothing really powerful, but I think it's a single or a dual core Atom processor in mine. The newer ones had the multi-core versions. But I found out that some enthusiasts made a firmware for this. And Netgear, I really have to give a lot of credit to Netgear, because they were the first network cards I used back in the 90s. Because back then you had 3Com and you had Intel. And 3Com was the cheapest, like $95 to $150 for a network card. Intel cards were, a few $100s. And Netgear came along and was selling Linux and SCO Unix and BSD compatible network cards for like $50, which was expensive in the 1990s, but it was a lot cheaper than $150 to $300 for the other two. And so I was a real fan of them. And that's why I used a lot of their networking gear, their switches and their routers and stuff. They've been a good, supporter over the years. So that's why I bought the Ready NAS, is because of my experience with them. Well, instead of swatting down these enthusiasts that kind of hacked their firmware and made a version for the previous generations of the Ready NAS, and like I said, instead of swatting them down, they're like, "Yeah, it works. Yeah, you did a good job. Impressive. If you do this, we're not supporting you." Because this happened when they were still under support. He said, "Yeah, you do this and you brick it. That's on you." And I read through a lot of forum posts, and there were more successes than there were failures. So I figured, hey, it's 12, 13 years old. What do I got to lose? And I followed the instructions, and you installed it through like updates, like you were installing an app on it through the store. But the store is long gone. But you could do like a local install. And the first one was the firmware, which updated the what we would consider the BIOS. And that was successful, and it rebooted. And then I did the next step, which was doing the OS install. And sure enough, worked. It booted up fine. I have SMB version 3 and some other bells and whistles. So I was really happy about it. But one thing I read in the comments was it came with a gig of RAM of DDR2. And some people saying, yeah, 2 is completely usable like it was before. And 4, if you can find them, is even better, because it'll use that for a disk cache if it has any extra memory. So I went on eBay and went on Amazon, and I found the least expensive one I could find. I didn't pull the trigger on some crucial 4 gig DDR2, because $50 was a little bit hard to swallow for 20-year-old memory. So I found SK Hynix for $18, $20. and I got that Wednesday, and I put it into the NAS, and the NAS has been running. I haven't really been using it that much, but it now has 1.5 gigs free of memory instead of 300 megabytes. So when I start using it as an rsync host, and I'm also going to be using it as a traditional NAS, I set it up for a public as in my local network, who I don't have to log into it. I have the firewall and stuff, so you have no access to it from outside. But that's pretty much what I've been up to.
Was it, as they say, you outkicked the coverage on that Netgear 12-year-old NAS device, so that's pretty good.
Yeah, I was really impressed where they didn't swat them down, because I was looking through the comments and I saw where they released it, and the people from you could tell they were Netgear employees with their usernames, and they're like, and some of them were like, "Can you check this? I mean, it works on ours, but we want the other community members to be able to benefit from this, because I looked at my e-receipt that I have from Micro Center, and I paid $600 for this in 2012, 2013. And it's still the same price. I mean, you go a Ugreen or a Synology, you're still spending $400 to $600 just for the unit, no drives. And these people are like, could you just do that? And like I said, I have to give Netgear a lot of credit. They're like, okay. And they came back and said, yeah, it works. If you brick it, that's on you. But yeah, it works. And so they actually pinned, stickied the instructions. Yeah, this is how you do it. Good luck. You break it, you bought it. And I'm like, good on you. I mean, we give a lot of companies crap about practices and stuff. And yeah, Netgear has done some, stupid things over the years, because every company does that. But I really have to give them kudos for that, because that was really stand up. It's not like, what's the other one? What's the other brand where they keep on kicking themselves in the face? They keep on having exploits.
You mean like Synology or somebody like that? What are you talking about?
It's not Synology. It's one of the other ones where they keep on having exploits, and they release updates that brick their machines, and they're like, they just tell their customers, "Oh, just buy a new one. It's out of life."
Intel?
I don't.
No, I'm trying to remember who it is. It's the
Another
one that a
NAS.
lot of people. It's the one that people always talk about because they're easily rootable. That you can put links on them.
QNAP,
QNAP, yes, QNAP. Yes, yeah. A lot of people like them because they're easily hackable. But like if you listen to Security Now or read on the security blogs, QNAP is on there more than Adobe was with Flash Player. I think there's a competition between Google Chrome, Flash, and QNAP for who's going to have the most exploits in a calendar year. And they've had some other problems with updates bricking and other problems. So there's a good way of doing things and there's a bad way of doing things. And QNAP has learned how the bad way of doing things. Although Synology, people are on the fence about Synology with having the blessed drives where, and I think it was either Highlander or Londoner. I think it was Highlander actually in the I think in the public Discord, or it could have been in the mintCast for Telegram. I'd check both of them. I can't remember. That somebody figure out how to get around that. But what Synology did is, we're thinking for financial reasons, they want to white label drives that they buy and they sell to you for a profit on their drives, or I mean not on their drives, on their NASs, on their. And allegedly, I'm thinking it's the business class and above. I'm thinking if it's like the entry level, like 2 bays and stuff like that. I don't think they're doing that, but I'm thinking the mid class and the professional line, they're making it so that you have to buy their drives. So
Sounds like something to be worked around.
yeah, like I said, I think it was Highlander. I think it was the one that had found a blog post about a hack of how to get around that. And I'm pretty sure this is probably going to be a whack-a-mole thing with Synology if they want to fight it. See if I can get these done before my hands completely cramp up. As you know, I'm not 20 years old anymore, and I cannot do these things in 30 seconds to a minute. It takes me 5 minutes just to get the wires straightened out.
A little bit too much movement, but I might put another spacer in. But it works, and it's holding together.
Cool.
Good job. When you talk about end of life of things, I was thinking about Leo Laporte and Steve Gibson. I think they have Drobos, and I think they've gone out of business. NAS's. So,
Oh, I forgot about them.
because they raved about them, and then they said no mas anymore. So, looks like in 2023 they ceased operation, but they're still using them until they. I think they said when they die they'll buy new ones, but they're still working now. So, but
Yeah, they had a weird. Not sure if Joe knows any more details on this. I think it was some type of weird JBOD thing that they used, where if you had like a terabyte drive, a 2 terabyte drive, and a 500 gig drive, you could plug them all in at the same time and have 2.5 terabytes.
No, I
Or
don't
no,
know
that's
anything about.
wrong math. Yeah, 3.5 terabytes.
yeah, you're right. Yeah, they did have some proprietary weird thing that you could do that because Leo Laporte and Steve Gibson talked about this back in the day. But yeah, it was definitely non-standard stuff they were doing on there. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that was ButterFS or not, because I know the Synologies and like my ReadyNAS, if you use the I can't remember what mode it is because I can't remember the names that they call it. It's X-rayed something. Then flex rate is what I have mine in there so that I can manually set my RAID level. I'm going to do mirroring. But the flex RAID was something similar to the Drobos where you could put in multiple size drives, but it's using ButterFS's striping mechanism for that, which is, I would, even though everybody gives ButterFS crap for not being safe, reliable, I know plenty of people that have been using it and it's been fine. I think one of my podcasts even mentioned that Facebook has been using it on all of theirs, on their servers, and not having a problem, but they're not doing the raid, even though they just released the raid and they claim that it's no longer data loss prone. People are a little bit shy of using it, but if you want to do like mirroring or striping, because striping is scary enough as it is. I mean, striping is good if you have a backup. That's how my media server is, because I got my movies on a 2 SSD stripe. And I want to tell you what, when Plex goes to scan in all the media to get all the metadata and everything, it did 350 movies and about a dozen television shows in about a minute and a half. I thought it failed. I was looking through the logs saying, okay, what broke? What failed? What broke? And I looked and I'm like, no, you were just fast. Let's see.
Yeah, Jim Salter on 2.5 Admins asked him he's not a big fan of ButterFS, but yeah, you're right that Facebook Meta has been using it at scale for quite a while, but like you said, they don't do the striping.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, I think theirs is probably either single disc volumes or maybe even mirrors. I'm not sure what they use, but I just went with ZFS just for the pragmatism in me, because I knew when I was in IT back in the late '90s, early 2000s, I knew a lot of HPUX, which didn't use it, but I knew a lot of HPUX and a lot of CentOS administrators, Solus, or Solaris administrators, and they raved up and down about ZFS before. This was when you would go to Santa Clara to be trained as a storage administrator, to be able to do ZFS and to learn it. And like I said, for my pragmatism is if a company was willing to state their reputation and these Fortune 500 companies' data to this file system, it's good enough for my DVD rips. It's good enough for my, my personal videos that I've made on my phone and pictures, my MP3s and stuff. So, and like everyone else says, like Jim Salter says, and what Alan Jude says, RAID is not a backup. RAID just makes access to your data faster and more resilient to power outages and stuff like that. But
disk failures and stuff like that.
Yeah, my plan is my computers are going to use free file sync and sync all the documents and files and stuff to the NAS, to my Ready NAS. Then I'm going to have a cron tab and set up an rsync so that it rsyncs itself to my storage server. And I'm also have external drive on my desktop here in my office, a 4 terabyte. So I figured, because what they always say is like you want to have, and I'm also, I think I mentioned this on mintCast. My friend and I are going to be each other's cloud backup using a Tailscale. So we're trying to get the bases covered. Offsite backup, 2 different file systems, and a remote and a external drive.
3, 2, 1
So
backups.
I'm going to have, so I'm going to have ZFS, then I'm going to have Butter on MD RAID, then I'm going to have ext4 on my external 4 terabyte, and then it's going to be ZFS for his data on mine. And I'm thinking I've converted him over to ZFS, though he's a big ButterFS fan. So I'm not sure what the data is going to be sitting on, but I'm not really that concerned because I've got four backups and 1 offsite, or 3 backups and 1 offsite. So
3 backups, 2 locations, at least 1 offsite.
Yeah. And I think I got it covered because that'll be ext4 on the external, ButterFS on MD RAID on the NAS, and then I have ZFS on my Proxmox. So I thought that was good. Oh, I also wanted to mention I hadn't turned on my couch laptop. It's a 6th gen Inspiron 13 Dell, and I hadn't turned it on since like February. I updated it last night or yesterday afternoon, whenever it was. 1.7 terabytes, or 1.7 gigabytes rather, not terabyte. 1.7 gigabytes of updates, like 300 and something packages. And it took a while for it to do it, but I rebooted it and it's fine. That was February, March, April, May, June. That was 5 months of not having any updates at all. So if anyone wanted to try Solus, you don't have to worry about any reliability problems with the installing updates, because I'd say it's every bit as reliable as Debian stable, but you get newer packages with Solus.
You mentioned HPUX, and in my early sysadmin days, that's where I first got started, was on HPUX.
Yeah, I don't really know that much about it. I know, like, computer club I belonged to, he was HPUX was at the university, and the SunOS Solaris was a guy I worked with when I was on site at Goodyear. But I'm thinking he was at the University of Akron, I think. I can't remember. It's been 20-some years ago, 20, 25 years ago, so I don't really remember. It was either Kent State or Akron U. But yeah, do you remember? Excuse me, sinuses. Did it use UFS?
UFS, I'm not sure what that is. I mean, it used.
That was the file system that like the BSDs used, and I know HPUX forked off of.
Yeah, I don't think it was that file system. I don't remember the file system. It seemed like it was their big thing was POSIX standard, but I don't know how that affected the file system, because, like you said, it's been so long ago. So
yeah, I was just curious because I know Silicon Graphics had XFS, and it was ported to Linux in like '93.
Test. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just testing out this headset. How do I sound? Better? Okay. Test, test, test. 1, 2, 3. Test, test, test. Okay. Well, I call this a fix for now. Let's see how long it lasts. Yeah, I just haven't worked on any in a while.
I didn't do that this time.
Good job.
But yeah, go ahead. What you're talking to Joe.
Oh, what were you saying?
Oh, I was talking about HPUX, and I was, back, I first kind of getting into it and stuff. I installed a new system, HPUX, and something wasn't working. And one of my counterparts or colleague was visiting from Singapore, and so I was asking, I got a new install, this should be working. And he tested something. He says, "Oh, you didn't put the patches or updates on." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, you have to install updates." Updates. I said, "What is this update things?" Now, this is circa like 1993. So this is going way back. Anyway, I was just, the concept of updating a system was totally foreign to me after you install a new Unix system or whatever back then. So anyway, that was, like I said, one of those moments in learning the world of system
What
installs.
year did you say that was?
This was like 93, 94.
I'm pretty sure that updating Linux systems was new to most people at that point.
Yeah, true that.
Especially if it was
Yeah,
on a like a home computer. Because
Well,
I
yeah,
remember 1993 vaguely. Well, I would have been like, okay, I would have been 12, so I'd have probably been in foster care. Um, so almost nobody actually had a computer, and the adults that didn't really let kids my age touch them. So yeah, I would find it surprising. Everybody was running freaking Windows back then. ME. So I'm not even sure if it was ME. What would it have been? 3. No, would have been after 3.2.
yeah, it wasn't ME back in that era. It was probably, I don't know,
90,
Windows 95 or
90, 93
Windows.
would have been Windows for Workgroups, like 3.11.
I was just going to say, yeah, it was.
Well, I was saying 3.2. I thought it was after 3.2. Like I said, I wasn't doing much on computers in '93 unless it was at the school on an OE2, and that
Yeah, I don't
was
remember the version. I don't remember all the version numbers. I remember 3.11 was a big one because it added native networking to Windows, so you didn't have to use the hacks to get it on a network. But another thing about what Charles was talking about, the updating the HBUX systems, this is something that I remember the Sun. This is kind of a funny thing. If you ever know an old school Solaris admin and a Sun admin, if you have a Sun admin that you know broke his teeth in on Sun, some of them wouldn't recognize Solaris as a name. They always would refer to like Solaris 2 or Solaris 1 as like SunOS 5 and SunOS 6. For some reason, I never knew the reason behind it, but they would not recognize Solaris as a brand name or a marketing name.
maybe it was just habit.
Yeah, but to Charles's point about the updating, I remember both the SunOS admin, Solaris admin, and the HPUX admin. They would always say about the updates only came when they bought a new server. Because one thing a lot of people didn't know back then, I knew this from what they told me and from my research I've done on my GUI article, which I still need to get back to, but my research for a lot of that stuff, Unix was sold as a platform. Everything, it's pretty much the whole BSD philosophy now. The operating system and the applications and the drivers are all written by the same people. And so you buy this server, this SCO server, or this, IBM server, you got everything you needed to use to be able to function. The only thing they didn't is you had to pay extra for the compilers. So if you wanted to do patches and any updates to the server, you needed to pay a per seat license for the compiler. So let's just say you just spent $20,000 on SCO Unix or HPUX for that one server, and you want to do updates and everything else to it, you needed to spend like another $1,000 or $5,000 or $10,000 for the license for the compiler. So the whole idea where you hear a lot of these guys saying that they never updated the servers, and why when people started migrating to Windows NT and everything, and you have these administrators have these bad habits of running, an NT server that's 5 years out of date. It's because old habits. And also back then you had to, if you had a fast enough connection, you could download the service pack, or you could get a subscription system with Microsoft, and they would mail you the CDs, and that's how you installed the service packs on Windows. But yeah, that kind of brought back that memory, because I remember one of the guys at one of the computer meetings I was at, he said, "Well, we're running whatever the newest version of HPUX is," and the other guy that was the Solaris admin is like, "Well, how did that go? I've never upgraded one of those." He goes, "Oh, we didn't upgrade it. We just bought a new server."
Well, I am going to end the stream, guys. Thanks everybody for joining. I had fun
Sounds
talking.
good. Okay. All right. Take care.